In what was the most crucial game of the 2022 college football season to this point, Georgia beat Tennessee this afternoon 27-13. This turned out to be a dominant performance by Georgia. This team knocks off Tennessee here today, who came in as the top-ranked team in the country. And for a reason, Tennessee, this team averaging 50 points a game heading into this matchup, and Georgia only allowed 13 points in this matchup. A very impressive win for Georgia, and obviously both these teams being ranked in the top three. This game is going to have some big college football playoff implications. So we'll be talking about those here today and recapping this game as a whole. Let's get into it with your stats for this matchup. Tennessee's quarterback Hendon Hooker, 23 for 33, 195 yards, and one pick in this game. So not the best game for Hendon Hooker, but he remains as one of the top quarterbacks in the country. And honestly, this Tennessee offense in general just had a tough time getting anything going here today. And obviously going up against an outstanding Georgia defense. We know the Bulldogs defense is great, but Tennessee just had, once again, a really tough time scoring. Jalen Wright, 21 attempts, 69 yards, did have a touchdown, so he didn't have a bad day. But the receiving core, of course, we saw Jalen Hyatt. He had a really tough time getting going, but Cedric Tillman had a pretty good performance, 7 receptions for 68 yards. So Tillman is the top receiver on this team in this matchup. And as for Georgia, Stetson Bennett, 17 for 25, 257 yards and 2 touchdowns. A really solid game out of Stetson Bennett. Kenny McIntosh was the top in rushing, 10 attempts for 52 yards. And Ladd McConkey was the top in receiving, 5 receptions for 94 yards and 1 touchdown. So, from the start, Tennessee got on the board first. They took a 3-0 lead, but that was the only time that Tennessee led in this matchup. They only led for pretty much a minute and a half in this game. Georgia came back, scored a touchdown, and by the end of the first quarter, it's 14-3. By halftime, it was 24-6, and at that point, it was starting to look distant that Tennessee would have any chance of knocking off Georgia. And in the second half, there wasn't too much scoring. Georgia was able to score a field goal in the third quarter, and in the fourth quarter, late in the game, Jalen Wright scored a touchdown and brought Tennessee within a couple of touchdowns, but despite this being only a 2-touchdown win for Georgia, it kind of felt like Georgia won by like 3 or 4 touchdowns just because of obviously them getting up 24-6 like after the first half. But also, the Bulldogs just dominated Tennessee, especially on defense from the start. So a really impressive performance here today out of Georgia. And obviously this team being replaced by Tennessee as the top-ranked team in the country, you can tell that the Bulldogs had a chip on their shoulder in this matchup. Tennessee, the Vols' playoff hopes are now going to be in question. At least Tennessee kept it somewhat close. I think that late touchdown was pretty important because, this is a game that the committee is going to be obviously looking at quite a bit. And when it comes down to it, when we get to college football playoff season, and you're looking at Tennessee, who's a one-loss team. For Tennessee now, they got to really play well down the stretch if they want any chance of being in the playoff. They don't control their own destiny anymore. It's now Georgia who's more than likely going to be in the SEC title game to face either Alabama or LSU, and you would assume it's going to be Alabama. And whichever team wins that obviously is in the college football playoff. And depending on how Alabama does down the stretch or your SEC West champion, Tennessee still has a chance to get into the college football playoff, but it is going to be a tougher road for Tennessee, even though I still think the Vols are very much a team in contention. But offensively, couldn't get anything going. That was honestly the moral of the story here for Tennessee, is they were just dominated by Georgia's defense. They still got around 300 yards, but scoring was definitely a challenging thing for Tennessee. And this is still a team that I see a very high ceiling in. This is a team that, Hendon Hooker, he's been nothing short of outstanding this season. Obviously, wasn't his best game here today. But in general, Tennessee is still a very talented team, and so you can't count them out quite yet, even though they took a loss here today. Georgia Bulldogs just proved they're a real contender. This team could very well go on to win a second straight national title. The way the defense looked here today, that is very much something that needs to be considered, is that Georgia is a very real national contender. And they've likely now won the SEC East as well. This is pretty much your SEC East championship here today. Both teams really don't have a major game moving forward. So more than likely, we're going to see a 12-0 Georgia team and an 11-1 Tennessee team heading into the postseason. And that's kind of something that we knew going into this matchup, was this was more than likely going to be the SEC East championship game, pretty much a semifinal game to get into the SEC title game. But that said, moving forward, more than likely Tennessee's going to drop 2 to 4 positions. That all depends on how Clemson performs here tonight, and also Alabama. Those games have not happened yet. But more than likely, I could see Tennessee dropping down to probably somewhere between number 3 and number 5, once again, depending on how the games go here tonight. But I can't imagine they'll be number 2. I mean, I'd probably put Ohio State or Michigan ahead of Tennessee at this point, as long as, Ohio State won here today. So we'll see how that turns out. But Tennessee, as of right now, I would drop a couple of positions. And for Georgia, they will definitely return to number 1 after this win. This is more than likely the best win of the season now, as Tennessee, of course, beat Alabama a couple of weeks ago. But with Georgia's win here, this basically tops that. So you got the Bulldogs, who will be back at number 1 in the college football playoff rankings come next Tuesday. And looking forward, both teams have got winnable matchups in week number 11. You got Tennessee, who faces off against Missouri, who is 4-5. Missouri's not bad. Missouri did give Georgia a fight earlier in the season, so that is a game to keep an eye on. But Tennessee does have it at home. And then Georgia faces off against Mississippi State in Starkville, who is 5-3 on the season. So that is not a game to sleep on. Mississippi State is a good football team despite being 5-3, having 3 losses on the season. So that is not a game to sleep on. But I do think Georgia is very much in a great position to win that. But that said, that's going to wrap it up for today. Let me know your thoughts on this matchup in the comments below. And stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll catch you guys all in the next one.